we're working on it right now, but it is.
Post-process all of it.
Three people are watching and I'm one of them. Joe's one of them. Okay, we're good, it's on. Thank you. And is it there? I think we're there. Ladies and gentlemen, it is 6:30. So we'll do a quick, we're gonna start the meeting. First with the quorum. So we have Mr. Puritan, Mr. Lanois, Mr. Durr, myself, John Talbot. So we have a quorum. Ms. Kaplinger is excused to go somewhere nice this evening on spring break. So it will be the four of us. So please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, well, welcome to the Planning Board's public hearing on land use articles. And so before we get started, I'd like to just kind of go over, set some expectations for this evening so that no one is surprised. Purpose of the town meeting is a required meeting, has to be done no more than 30 days, no less than 7 days before the town meeting. And so we're inside that window now. And the goal this evening is to inform the citizens prior of the land use articles and what they're about prior to the town meeting. And what you see at the back of the room are the final drafts. They're not yet approved. They will be voted on at the town meeting. So a couple of things that are important to know starting out is that what you see are the final drafts. So there will be no changes that come out of tonight's meeting. So we'll give you you'll get the information on what they're about. But basically these final drafts are locked in until the town meeting and the vote. So it is the vote of the town that will decide whether they're truly final or not. So again, I said tonight is an information meeting. It's not really a policy discussion. We've been there, done that. I think each of these articles, there's been at least 10 meetings, 2 or 3 public sessions of some kind. So there's been a lot said about them. They've been out on the web, but again, this is a chance to kind of get the final version of it out there to you. So please sign in and grab a copy of the ordinances there if you want them. Okay, so how is it going to work then? This is unlike some of the planning board stuff that we do. This is a much more formal discussion. If you want to say something or talk about the article that is before us, please raise your hand. I'll recognize you. Is that the mic we're going to use, George? Please sit at that mic over there. State your name and address. If you're representing a committee or a board, please say which of those that you represent, or if you're just here representing yourself. So all of your comments and questions should be directed to me. So if you have a question about something, I direct it to me, and I will direct it to the appropriate person. And this is not a back and forth discussion. So, and it's definitely not, my feelings will be hurt if you turn to somebody in the audience and ask them for the answer. So please direct them to me, and we'll move on from there. Everybody's going to get about 3 minutes. We have 4 major topics to discuss tonight in about 2 hours. And that includes, Mr. Tavares has a nice presentation on what these are about. So we're going to try to hold it down to 3 minutes per person. I would ask that you be respectful, limit it to the topic at hand. When you come up to the microphone, speak into the microphone, because I think our technology goes back to the Spanish Inquisition in the 1400s. And as mentioned, this is not a policy discussion. So the process is going to be, we'll just read the article language. The town planner is going to do a short presentation, and then it's your turn, and we'll have the planning board kind of ask any questions comments that they may have at the end. So having said that, I will find them. As I said, there are 4 articles before us, and, 3 articles, 4 topics. So, the first of the land use articles is Article 19. There are other articles on budget, business articles, so on and so forth. And all of this is on the web, on the town website. So if you want to know what the articles are or the budget lines or whatever it may be, that's also on the web. So Article 19, to see if the town will vote to enact amendments to the land use ordinance as set forth in the document Town of Durham Land Use Ordinance as adopted at town meeting April 6, 2024. Proposed revisions for town meeting April 5th, 2025, Part 1, and then draft amendments to the Resource Protection District to match the latest state data and give relief from buildings in the RP district, to remove areas previously designated as beginning with Habitat 6+ natural resource values and to grant relief to landowners with existing buildings and resource protection. So that's the article that you will be voting yes or no on. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Thamars.
Thank you, John. This first set of draft land use ordinance amendments is based on about a year's work by a combination of Conservation Commission members and Planning Board members who, under the direction of the Select Board, formed a working group and reviewed the newest state data from the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, as well as some detailed analysis that I did looking at the impact of the recently revised Resource Protection District on individual buildings within the resource protection. So the findings of that group and its work indicated that the zoning map was last updated in 2023, and that was based on some recommendations in the comprehensive plan to follow natural resources data provided by the state of Maine, particularly the Beginning with Habitat program. During the process leading up to that vote on the amended zoning map, there was public participation process, and significant concern was expressed by individual property owners about the accuracy of the state data and also the impacts of the new zoning on people's abilities to expand their existing homes and buildings and businesses. So after a review of the Durham data, the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife did review Durham's data and did a customized analysis of all of the resource data that they have, and confirmed that the co-occurrence map overestimated the amount of land in Durham that achieved a rating under their system of 6 or more co-occurrence of natural resources. So the proposed zoning map revisions will remove areas that were previously in that designation, and it will also, as I'll explain, put a what we're calling a development buffer around existing buildings so that people can expand their homes and businesses without having to go to either the Board of Appeals or the Planning Board, as is currently the situation. So this map is what the town was provided on 2 occasions leading up to the 2023 vote. And so what you see there in green is what under the 2018 comprehensive plan was designated as beginning with Habitat 6+ areas with co-occurrence of natural resources. And so the state did an analysis of all of those areas and found that the vast majority of them did not rise to that level of importance in terms of the value of the co-occurrence of natural resources. So this graphic would show you what the areas in orange are those areas that are no longer considered by the state to meet that threshold, and those will be removed from the zoning map as a result of this amendment. Beyond that, there were approximately about 50 buildings within the Resource Protection District. About 15 of those came out of the resource protection as a result of that modification for the Beginning with Habitat data, but there were still 30 or so others that would still be restricted from expansion just by virtue of being even partly in the Resource Protection District. So we did a detailed analysis of every building we could identify that was within the Resource Protection District, and the working group came up with the proposed treatment for individual buildings. And the first of those would be buildings in the floodplain, such as along the Androscoggin River, along Royalsboro Road. And those buildings are subject to the federal flood management requirements. And so if they were to do expansions, they would still have to meet the flood requirements. But the question is, should they be pretty much restricted from development because of the resource protection? So the working group recommended that a area within 100 feet of those existing structures be removed from the resource protection, thereby facilitating expansions of those buildings. So that is the parameter that's being applied for properties within the resource protection district that are there solely because of the floodplain designation. Similarly, there are lots of areas in town that have forested wetlands, and the same treatment would be given to those if a building is in the resource protection, just simply because it's in a forest. It was or is now in a forested wetland area. A 100-foot distance would be taken from each of those buildings, and that would be removed from the resource protection district with this map amendment. The working group took a little bit different approach in terms of stream buffers. That's a more sensitive resource than a floodplain or a forested wetland. And so this building, for example, but just by virtue of the fact that this building here is on, I think it's on the line with Pownell, is just the fact that it's touched by the Resource Protection District makes it a non-conforming structure, which requires them to go either to the Planning Board or the Board of Appeals. And so the amendment here would simply pull the Resource Protection District away from the building, thereby enabling the property owner to expand on the sides of this or rear, as long as they go no closer to the protected resource. So that was kind of the resolution that the working group felt was giving appropriate relief while at the same time protecting the town's important natural resource. Similarly, there are a couple of spots in Durham where there are high value wading bird waterfowl habitats. This is off the end of Snow Road, and so that's an important breeding area for waterfowl. And there's a 250-foot buffer that's recommended by the Maine Department of Environmental Protection, which really buffers that habitat from human activities such as pets and other types of activities. So again, there's the only two buildings that I'm aware of in town that intrude upon that buffer, and the proposed resolution would pull the building out of the resource protection, and then they could do expansions either to the sides or away from that protected resource. So those would be the parameters, and when you include removing the 6+ co-occurrence as well as those 100-foot building buffers, that is what is depicted on the draft zoning map that will be voted on as part of Article 19 of the town meeting warrant.
Okay. With that, I will open the public hearing portion of this. So anyone in the audience who has questions or comments about Article 19, please come up to the mic, state your name and address, and if a member of a committee, which committee you're on. And you kind of get one shot at this, so please bring all your questions and comments with you. So don't be shy. No one? Okay, in that case, I will close the public hearing on resource protection and open it up to comments from the planning board.
Nice work, George. Thank you for the presentation.
Okay, that's a good comment. Are there any other Okay, it looks like we did beat this horse to death over the last 6 or 7 months, so, anyway, there's no skin loss. So having said that, the next step is this will be on, it already is on the articles for, town meeting, and it will be, a vote at that point in time. So, we'll move on to article number 20. Okay, to see if the town will vote to enact amendments to the land use ordinance as set forth in the document, Town of Durham Land Use Ordinance is adopted at town meeting April 6, 2024. Proposed revisions for town meeting April 5th, 2025, part 2. Draft amendments to apply contract zoning to any large battery energy storage, or solar system energy enact best standards. Land use ordinance articles 2, 3, 5, and 19 to require contract zoning approval for large-scale energy projects and enact safety and other performance standards to apply to commercial and industrial scale battery energy storage systems. So these are two new topics that have not been in the land use ordinance to date, both contract zoning and battery energy storage. And if you remember back in November, the town, at a special town meeting, you all approved a 6-month moratorium to give us time to come up with standards for to apply to battery energy storage, which we've done. And in addition, and during that, the development of that, I believe the town attorney and some of the town staff recommended the use of something called contract zoning be applied, and as a weapon to weapon's probably the wrong term, but as a tool to help work with battery energy storage systems and large-scale solar. So remember a year ago we approved the solar system and solar farms, solar energy systems, and this puts the large systems underneath contract zoning if approved. So I'll quit stumbling, and Mr. Thabarge, if you would expand on that.
Yes, John, as you indicated, this is actually an extension, part of it is an extension of the work done with the Conservation Commission. Last year, the town enacted its first standards addressing solar energy systems, which are popping up all across the state, and many communities have enacted moratoriums or adopted standards to address some of the safety issues as well as the visual impacts of large-scale solar energy systems. So the Conservation Commission did a lot of research on that. The Planning Board then took that, and that actually went to a vote of last year's town meeting, and the town currently has standards for solar energy systems. So now the town, during that whole process, we became aware of the developing trend somewhat associated with solar energy systems of battery energy storage systems, because solar energy storage systems have this challenge, unlike other types of energy, where you can only collect it during times when you have the solar gain, and then they're looking for ways to store that. And one of the technologies that's rapidly developing is battery energy storage systems. And what you see on the slide on the left is a 5-acre project that was approved by the Durham Planning Board over the last 2 years. It's currently under construction, and that is a 175 megawatt battery energy storage system, not for a solar application, but that's just being connected to the grid for help in stabilizing the grid, and pricing of electricity is all a big part of that. And we had received inquiries from private interest about the possibility of putting one of these in Durham. And so that led to the moratorium and the pressing need to put into place regulations that will help the town deal with the particular issues here, which are most importantly the public safety aspects of these things. Have had a history in other states of having serious fires, and the frequency of those led the state of New York to appoint a special task force to look at the safety aspects. And we reviewed that research, and have incorporated some of their recommendations into the draft regulations that we're looking at currently. So the findings that we looked at were that, as I mentioned, that project in Gorham that has just gone in, and the Gorham Planning Board had no standards other than their site plan review standards. So they had no way of dealing with a lot of these safety issues, and it was an industrial area that they're putting it in. So people weren't particularly as concerned, and they have a much more capable fire apparatus, public safety system in Gorham than Durham has. So for whatever reason, they did not look at a lot of the issues and we're looking at. In addition, what heightened the concern for the town of Durham is that the town attorney has advised that the utility scale battery energy storage systems, or BESS, meet the definition of essential services under Durham's current ordinance. So anywhere along those power lines, a project could be proposed, and the planning board couldn't even apply the conditional use criteria, which deal with scale, drainage, and all of those issues that we apply to almost every other commercial project. Couldn't even apply those standards, only the site plan review standards, which don't speak at all to the issues associated with BESS. So that led to the select board proposing and the town adopting the moratorium. And as mentioned, there are significant safety, noise, and environmental concerns associated with these that the ordinance has no standards whatsoever to apply to those. So this 6-month moratorium has given the board the opportunity to pull together something relatively quickly, and it's all drafted and ready to go. And we are looking at the proposed regulatory program consisting of the BESS standards as the first piece. Additionally, the town attorney came in who had recommended the moratorium, and based on work with other communities, she saw contract zoning as a potential additional regulatory tool that Durham might want to apply. And what that does is makes any large scale energy project, whether solar or battery, to basically go through a special zoning process that could only be approved at town meeting. And so that's kind of the other part of this that came at the recommendation of the town attorney. So just to help everybody understand what we're talking about with battery energy storage systems, this was a presentation we did last fall to help people. So the orange box there is the approximate size of one of these shipping container size battery energy storage units, and those are used in those commercial industrial scale projects like Gorham. The smaller green one over here, the mid-sized commercial, would be more for, say, there's a project in Falmouth where they just put in, I think it's 2 acres of solar panels for a particular business, and that business could use that type of a system. Again, when on periods where they don't have the solar, they would have that available to operate their business equipment. And then the small green one on the left is what a typical residential property might include in their home, one or more of those, just for their personal solar systems. So just to help everybody understand the numbers, the sense of these, the average household use is about 30 kilowatt hours per day, or 900 per month if you look at your electric bill. And the typical size of those units there on the right picture are about either 10 by 32 or up to 40 feet long. And one of those typically is about 1 megawatt hour of storage capacity. And so that one of those things will power about 33 homes for one day at full utilization of their electricity. If it's in a power outage, obviously they would try to limit it like you do with your generator or anything. So the draft standards for battery energy storage systems include establishing 3 tiers with regulations applying to the home, business, and industrial scale, with different standards applying to each of those tiers. All BESS systems would be required to meet the latest testing and fire safety codes for all components of it. They have the internal, the connections, the monitoring. A lot of safety features have been addressed in the recent code updates based on those research by the New York task force in particular, but others as well. Tier 2 and Tier 3, either if you do one of those shipping container size or more, then you go through, and it's outside your building. If you did one, say, for some big business that had a high intense energy need, that would the unit would have to go through site plan review, but not through the contract zoning approval by a town meeting. If you do more than one of those megawatt battery energy storage systems, then you're into that Tier 3, which then kicks in additional requirements, including the town meeting vote for contract zoning. This proposal will require, one of the concerns that the fire chief brought into the discussion was the concern for water, for fire protection. And so we got really a lot of good, important feedback from the fire chief based on the local needs of the fire department in terms of one of the things he pointed out is that you can require a water source for fire protection, but if the wind is blowing in the wrong direction, and one of the issues with these is potential for toxic gases, they may not be able to use that hydrant because the wind's blowing at them. So we put in a requirement for redundant water sources and access to the facility from all four sides. So that's the type of very strict scrutiny and input we've gotten and put into these regulations. Also looking at screening where visual impact may occur, and also for important decommissioning of these facilities when and if they are abandoned. And this would exempt all home applications. And one of the other changes that was made as a result of the public input, basically one of those Tesla packs is about 20 megawatt hour capacity. And so working with the Conservation Commission to try to facilitate home solar systems, the threshold for allowance without site plan review or town meeting was 70 kilowatt hours, which would be about 3 of those packs for an individual home. All they'd have to do is meet the electrical code and safety requirements. So then, as I said, the town attorney brought in the issue of contract zoning as an additional tool, and the Conservation Commission had been working on looking at some way of identifying what parts of Durham should have allowance for large solar energy systems, such as a gravel pit that's been mined out would be an ideal location. Putting it in prime agricultural land would not be a good location. So they'd been looking at this issue of where, have some sort of mechanism to determine where these solar energy systems, and particularly ones like the town of Green had a proposal for 600 acres in that town, went into high stress response mode when that proposal came. So the town attorney recommended considering contract zoning, which says for any of those large industrial scale to come into Durham, they would have to go through a town meeting vote after an extensive process of negotiating, and the town would be able to put more restrictions on it through that mechanism than it could under traditional zoning, and would be able to look for added public benefits, such as addressing any deficiencies of the local fire department capacity to deal with this type of development. So the select board had recommended moving forward with a contract zoning, and a lot of discussion was over whether solar should be included or should not be included, and where the select board came out as a kind of a compromise is to say any solar farm of 20 acres of development area or more would have to go through a town meeting vote. Anything under that would just go to the planning board under the regulations. So the key findings on the contract zoning is that concern for anywhere in town right now. As I said, the Conservation Commission had been looking at suitable locations. And both the solar energy systems as well as BESS have potential benefits for the community from a tax standpoint, but also could significantly impact the town's rural character, which is one of the highest priorities of the recently adopted comprehensive plan. This provides a mechanism to look at them on a case-by-case basis, looking at the comprehensive plan, looking at the potential benefits to determine if it is in the best interest, and it'll be up to the voters at town meeting to just make that final decision. Applicants would propose for a specific piece of property or a set of properties for a contract zoning. They would put together a proposal, the staff would review it, look at the ordinance requirements, talk to the select board in terms of priorities, and then the applicants would file a formal application, and the select board and planning board would review that against the comprehensive plan, have a public hearing, and then the select board would decide whether it's something that they would decide to put on to the town meeting for a contract zoning vote. So the draft amendments, as I said, any BESS, battery energy system, or a solar farm of 20 acres or more would only be allowed as through the contract zoning process. So that is the proposal for contract zoning and BESS. Part 2, Article 20.
Okay. I will jump in here just quickly before we go to that. It's important to note that the BESS and contract zoning are tied together. So there's two different issues, if you will, but one vote. So, excuse me, a vote on Article 20 is a vote for both contract zoning and battery energy storage. So if somebody likes contract zoning and not BESS and votes no, then neither one pass. So just or vice versa. So it takes it's not a yes vote, but an agreement on both topics. So with that, I will turn it over to the public, open the public hearing, and anyone who wants to discuss, comment on, ask questions about, I guess we'll do either contract zoning or battery storage together, since it's one vote. The lady in the back. Name, address, please.
Phyllis Brannon, Brookside Drive. So just for clarification, the town vote, sorry, looking at you, Alan. The town vote is voting on the ordinance. Can you just clarify what the town vote is for?
At the town meeting.
At the town meeting, sorry, yes.
Yeah, the vote at the town meeting for Article 20, if it's a yes vote, then both the contract zoning and battery energy storage will become part of the land use ordinance.
So is that voting yes, if the town votes yes, which would be on both, because it's a combined unit, are they voting yes that we want to have contract zoning and the storage, the battery storage come into our town? Sorry.
Yeah, to be clear, I think a yes vote would approve both of them. The contract contract zoning would be established. The standards for BESS would be established. But with this system, as George said, for big systems, then let's just say Green had 600 acres of solar farm. They had a mechanism in their system to stop that with a town meeting vote. We don't have that, or a planning board vote. So, but the fact that you put BESS into the land use ordinance doesn't mean that it's automatically going to be approved. Was that your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Friendly.
Hi, I'm Mike Friendly, run around Pond Road. My question is, what's the rationale between putting BESS and contract zoning in the same warrant? I think it would be safer to separate them, because my concern is we really need this BESS ordinance to pass. And I appreciate all the work you've done on it. But if people have concerns about contract zoning and they but they, don't want contract zoning, but want best to pass, they're kind of stuck. So I think it would be safer if they were separated, just so we don't have a situation where we have no ordinances at all to protect, siting of BES. Thank you.
Okay. I will take a shot at that and go back to my opening comment, which is what you see is what we're gonna vote on at this point. I guess, and I'll let somebody else jump in at the end, but I'm personally comfortable with tying them together, because my concern with BES is that if somebody comes in with enough information, and that being a developer or whatever, and there's not a reason, I'm not saying the planning board doesn't go out of its way to find reasons to turn things down, but we're fairly limited to what we can say yes or no to with the planning board, and even the best standards. And I think in my opinion, be very easy to meet those standards. So I don't want to go into this too much. Tying it to contract zoning, and George may have covered it, but you can say no at any point in the process with contract zoning. So it doesn't mean that just because they file that it will be approved. So I don't want to go too far into the policy, because we're going to vote on what we've got now, so. Okay, are there any other questions or comments? Ma'am?
Jess Costa on Brianna Drive. So I just want to clarify if the vote, if we approve contract zoning, that's going to only include BES, and it will also include solar under contract zoning as the warrant's written now. Is that right?
Yeah, and before I answer that one, it's a vote for both BES and contract zoning. So if it's a yes for both articles. And the answer is yes, there is a table of use that is part of the contract zoning article that includes large-scale solar projects.
So contract zoning at this time, if approved, would include BES and solar. So I just want to clarify that, and I just want to express my concerns with only including those two types of development under contract zoning. I see it as anti-solar and anti-renewable energy in our town. And I think that we should have, if we're going to adopt something like contract zoning, it should apply to other types of development in our town, like potential large warehouses coming in, or other new gravel pits, or even large subdivisions.
And we're probably going too far down the policy discussion at this point, Jess. And I guess I would say that this is the first step for contract zoning. It's not to say that down the road, the select board, and I can't speak for them, but it is, in this case, it is the first step in the use of contract zoning.
But there may be the potential, say in 2026 on the warrant, to potentially include other types of large development, maybe. So I just want to see if, that's going to be maybe
Yeah, I think that's
possibility
probably
down
not
the
a
road.
topic for this evening, but that's something to address with the select board.
All right. Yep, those are my only comments.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And I'd like to commend both Jess and Michael, were extremely helpful with resource protection and in the battery and solar development. Any other questions from the audience about BES and/or contract zoning? If not, I'll close the public hearing and ask the planning board if there are any.
Well, there's one thing that I certainly appreciate with contract zoning is that any large project, it'll be highlighted to all the townspeople. It won't be just going to the planning board. So all the townspeople will be able to review that through the town meeting process, which I think is a plus. Because some people may say, there's a lot of things, some people's opinion is that things go on behind the scenes. In this particular case, it would not. It'll be right out there for everybody to analyze and vote on.
The other direction?
Go ahead.
What's that?
You all set? If it If this ordinance does not pass, would you please explain what happens to Bess? Because we're under a moratorium right now. Mr. Chairman?
Okay, excellent question. And thank you for trusting me on that one. Anyway, we do have a moratorium, 6 months, right now, approved by the town at the special town meeting. At the end, if this does not pass, at the end of the 6 months, the select board has the option to extend the moratorium for another 6 months. So let's just say that it doesn't pass. It would be up to the select board, the planning board, to, I think, figure out why it didn't pass. What was it that the town didn't like? They didn't like BEST, they didn't like contract zoning, they didn't like the pieces together, and then come up with a plan B and bring it back to the town for another vote, a special election or however that may be. So there would be, I think, an additional 6 or 7 months to work it out. And did you have anything, Mike?
No, my only comments are policy related, so I'll save them for town meeting.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna say something policy related, I guess, to build on what Alan does. This is the contract zoning, if BES alone gives us tools to work with the developer. But it doesn't give us the ability to, to say no if they really, truly come in and show that they can meet these requirements. So contract zoning, if it is a really bad project for the town, gives the town the ability to do that. And it also brings in the contract zoning process, or BES, and large solar, has potential for large tax advantages, tax payments. So I will stop saying policy things and close it out if there's nothing else. If not, let's move on to, and again, it's one vote for both items. Article 21, to see if the town will vote to enact amendments to the land use ordinance as set forth in the document Town of Durham Land Use Ordinance as adopted at town meeting April 6, 2024. Proposed revisions for town meeting April 5th, 2025, Part 4. Draft amendments to revise the process and the standards for projects involving historic properties, land use ordinance, Articles 5, 12, and 19, to bring Durham's historic preservation standards and regulatory process into consistency with state law and Durham's comprehensive plan. Okay, Mr. DeMarsh, if you would, please.
Yeah, the third set of land use ordinance draft amendments deals with historic preservation. And this is a set of recommendations from the town attorney and the select board, being as opposed to the planning board or the conservation commission. So just to give you a little bit of background, the town currently has one historic district, the Southwest Bend Historic District, that was established around 2004-05. And within that district, it has about 33 buildings. Only 3 of those have been determined to be of official historic significance. There are 5 other buildings outside the district, which would be the Bliss Farm Inn, the West Durham Methodist Church, the Osgood House down on Royalsboro, almost into Freeport, the Friends Meeting House, and then the Shiloh Temple. Those are outside of the district, and those are currently controlled by, not by the historic district, but by a 1,500-foot de facto district that was applied around the other 5 properties. And under this current ordinance, any project within a quarter of a mile of those other 5 would have to be reviewed for historic significance and impacts, potential impacts, whether they're historic or not. And the town attorney, and I think everybody involved in the process, agrees that those 1,500-foot buffer around those historic properties doesn't really pass muster with anything. And so that would be eliminated from the current ordinance, and the focus would be on the properties themselves, not everything within a quarter mile of it. The other problem with it, both for that in particular, but even for the Southwest Bend District itself, the town has no record of its formation in terms of documentation of the historic surveys or public participation to meet the requirements of the ordinance. And so the town attorney has pointed to the potential that the town may not be able to enforce its regulations because of questions about how the district was formed and whether or not, like with the resource protection question of the accuracy of the data, there's really not enough solid, objective data on historic qualities and character of those properties to sustain any type of a legal challenge that might be brought against the town. So the proposal, after reviewed by the town attorney and as recommended by the select board, will eliminate the de facto 1,500-foot historic districts around the designated historic buildings. It will repeal the Southwest Bend Historic District that does not meet documentation requirements for designation as a district. It'll focus the regulations on those official, there are 8 in town right now, those officially designated historic buildings. And as part of the process, the select board included a requirement that any commercial project or a subdivision coming in on any property abutting any of those 8 historic properties like Shiloh Temple, they would have to go through an advisory review by the Historic Commission and the standards for mitigation of impacts on those properties would be considered. The town attorney has also recommended revising the standards and procedures to follow federal and state requirements for a historic preservation program, which they have what they call certified programs in the state of Maine. And so she's recommending that the town come into line with the way this is done in most other communities. Also, the Historic Commission currently is a regulatory agency like the Planning Board or the Board of Appeals. They lack the resources necessary to administer that in a legally defensible manner. And so the town attorney is recommending that the Historic District Commission be transformed into an advisory commission like the Conservation Commission, where they will have important input, but they won't have that responsibility of issuing and defending permits. And this proposed set of amendments will assign the clear regulatory authority for issuing those permits to the code officer and the planning board, but will have mandatory reviews by the Historic Commission for looking at those details as part of any permit for any project on the 8 designated historic properties or any subdivision or commercial project being proposed on an abutting property. And these changes will streamline the review process, and this program will still go far beyond what most towns in the state of Maine, similar to Durham, most towns don't do any of this. Standish simply has a demolition notification requirement, but they do not have any of these protections. So this is still very ambitious in terms of Durham, and it is supported by your comprehensive plan. So we feel that this will bring it into alignment with all of the requirements for doing it right.
All set?
Yep.
Okay, I will open the public hearing, and keep turning that off so I don't make noise. Okay, I will open the public hearing and ask anyone who would like to comment to come up to the microphone, please. And it's on because I can see the red arrow. Sir, name and address.
My name is Gordon Grimes. I live at 1731 Royalsboro Road, which is the Nathaniel Osgood House. It's one of the National Register properties that this is going to cover. You had a nice picture of it. If you go back, it shows it in the background. In the foreground is a house I also own, which is the Brasilia Richards House. It's not on the National Register. I'm not sure whether or not it's eligible. That's one. My first question is, how does one determine whether the Maine Historic Preservation Commission deems it to be eligible? Is there going to be a list? I saw 2 properties that you listed there, but how would I go about finding out if they say, yes, it is, so that suddenly this is, applicable to it? That's my first question. My second question is trying to get clear who the reviewing authority is and the permitting authority is. Because the appeal, the final appeal, is only from the reviewing authority, not the permitting authority. So I'm confused. If I'm going to, let's say, do something that does require a building permit, and that was what would then trigger this, I would be going to the building inspector. Is the building inspector the reviewing authority and also the permitting authority? So I'm confused about that. And then my final question is this intended to apply only to the exterior of buildings? I've been involved in historic preservation for probably 50 years. I was president of the Maine Historical Society, the president of Greater Portland Landmarks, and have been on the boards of other similar things. I've never known to have an ordinance apply to the interior of a historic structure. But as I read this, there are sections that would appear to apply to some change to the interior if I needed a building permit to, let's say, move a wall, and maybe that wall had an old door on it. Would I need to come in and get approval from the Historic Commission? So those are my 3 questions. I only had 3 minutes, so I try to get those 3 in within the time. And I didn't know whether the time you will take to explain it takes up some of my 3 minutes.
I wish we'd shorten it. You're good? I would.
Yeah,
okay.
those are 3 areas. Yeah.
Okay. Mr. DeBarge, I'm going to ask you, I think you're probably most familiar with the process.
Yeah.
And I would say that normally wouldn't do it for an individual or an individual house, but I think it's important that same process is going to apply to anybody else down the road. And so I think it's a good time to say what applies to somebody else's house down the road versus just this gentleman's.
Okay, so the first question was, how is the eligibility for registration on the National Register of Historic Places done? And as was done for your building, that's currently on the register, what happens is you file an application. There's a process through the Maine Historic Preservation Commission. And they will look at, and part of what is kind of makes this process a little bit more non-commonsensical than other regulations like resource protection for habitat is that the historic preservation standards, as you may know, were originally done as a tax incentive for historic preservation. And so rather than putting what kind of stimulated the whole process was the tearing down of the train station in Portland back in the 60s. And so the federal government was pressured to try to save those types of very significant historic structures. So they put into the federal law a tax system that said, if you are spending money to preserve something like the North Station, then the federal government will give you a tax credit as long as it's being used for commercial purposes. The state also has a tax system. So in terms of determining whether or not a proposed project that will get tax dollars qualifies for those tax dollars, you have to meet certain preservation guidelines. So what local municipalities have done is they've taken that tax qualification system and adopted it as a regulatory program, the same standards. And that's what has made this very, very somewhat confusing to try to administer it as a regulatory program, because a lot of it is just very subjective decisions on what's important historically. City of Portland right now is in a big room about the Children's Museum, And there are historic preservationists that say this is one of the most important buildings in the city. Others are saying no, its historic significance was altered to the point where it's no longer significant. Trying to regulate something like that is extremely difficult. And now when you take that down to a town like Durham compared to city Portland with all of its resources, it's doubly difficult to do this and do it in a way that meets all legal requirements. So, first thing to recognize is that determination of eligibility is done by the Maine Historic Preservation Commission, and they have expert historic preservationists evaluate the property to see what is its significance from a historic standpoint in the town, like Nathaniel Osgood. What is its important architecturally? Was it a time period like the Greek Revival time period or the Federal period? What time period was it done in, and how much modification has been done to it since that time that may have pretty much altered to the point where it's no longer recognized or eligible. So that's the process. Now, under this ordinance, the Historic Commission would review and make recommendations to the Maine Historic Preservation Commission.
So you can apply yourself.
Yep.
And then they would make a decision. Or the Historic Commission could say, I think that house should qualify, and they would then apply to put it onto your property?
I believe that the state Maine Historic Preservation Commission has indicated that the town as an entity, whether it's the Historic Commission or any other, can file a nomination for it. Now, obviously, the town would most likely not do that if the property owner were not in favor of it and would work with, usually it's going to be an individual property owner like yourself that's going to say, I would like to take advantage of that. But what prevents a lot of people from doing it is you cannot get tax breaks if it's just for residential purposes.
There's no tax break.
Right.
You don't get any money. I've never received any money for any tax break. So,
Right.
so don't fool yourself on that. No one would want to put this onto themselves. I did it because I believe in historic preservation.
Right. It's
it's
voluntary.
But you've answered that first
Yep.
question. So
Okay.
then the next
His
question
time
is-
does not count against your 3 minutes.
Then you're questioning who is the permitting authority versus the reviewing authority. They're really the same thing. And why that language is used is because depending on what permit is being reviewed, applied for, certain permits are issued by the code officer, certain permits are issued by the planning board. So like say the Bliss Farm Inn is a conditional use application if they were to put another building up or make modifications to it. So that would go to the planning board for potentially site plan review. If it's residential, then only building permits would be reviewed by that. So it's kind of a technical term that's used by the lawyers, but the reviewing authority and the permitting authority typically are the same entity.
Yeah, I couldn't find either mentioned in any of the ordinances. It's not there. So my only concern is that if the only appeal is from the reviewing authority's
Yeah.
final decision, and the permitting authority says you can't have the permit, I've got no appeal.
Yeah, so whether it's the code officer or the planning board under this ordinance, and we can get clarification from the town attorney, but basically the permitting authority, reviewing authority. So for example, the difference is the code officer issues an actual physical permit, building permit. The planning board issues a conditional use approval in a notice of decision. So is that a permit? It definitely is a regulatory review, so that's why they use both terms.
But I wouldn't need to go to the planning board if I'm only changing the position of a window. I just only go to the code
That's
enforcement
correct.
officer. Is that officer the reviewing authority
Yes.
and the permitting
Yes.
authority? I think it would help, Mr. Chairman, if there's some clarification of that, because as it goes on, there are chances that people are gonna be confused as to who you can appeal from. So, all right, now interior, exterior.
This ordinance, there's language in here I can point you to that indicates that the exterior is the concern.
Okay. Is the only part that's covered by the ordinance, okay.
Yep.
answered my questions.
Okay.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Nice to meet you.
Well, thank
for
you,
coming.
thank you for doing that. And I think to your point about clarifying that is something we can look at and tweak as we're getting into the next round. So, you know, not this year, but down the road with codification and other things. But thank you. Are you interested in joining the historic?
I drafted the first zoning ordinance of this town, and when I got up to present it to the town meeting, I was called a communist. I've been involved in town affairs, I know church and I know one another. I might at some point, I've got things on my plate right now that really limit. I travel a lot, and I just can't always make meetings, so I hate to commit to something that.
Please consider, and I've been called worse than a communist. Anything else from the audience on historic? Planning board. Okay, we made it under an hour. With that, I will close the public hearing piece, and I will just kind of remind everybody the 5th of April at 9 a.m. in Durham Community Schools, and the 4th of April is the election, and I think that at Eureka. So if there is nothing else, we shall accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Anybody else want to talk about it? If not, please raise a hand. We're out of here. Thank you all for attending. I don't think we do have 3 things for April's meeting. Bowie Hill came in, Rep. Nova's coming in, and
Lunch with friends, but yet I scheduled. Thank you.